Hi, so I'm super excited today because we are going to make a very cool Halloween cake. I've already made one. It's very old, it's already destroyed a little, but the idea is with these tiny skulls, and I've got a new mold for a bigger skull. And I was thinking to just replicate this, but better. But no, today we are working on the my cake for a masterclass that I will be doing. And I was thinking about something that you can replicate at home and learn something instead of just pouring chocolate into the form, right? So what we're gonna do? This is my wobbly cake that I made. I made it from my zombie cakes in a fridge. It's not edible anymore. It wasn't edible for maybe a year or so, whatever. It's just a test cake to prove the idea. I didn't want to use a dummy because we are going to cut the cake. I've got this cool chocolate cake pan. It's a cake pan, but we are not going to bake a cake in it because it will be horrible. And I covered the inside with the same ganache, and I have my cake pops mixture, which is also made from zombie cakes in my fridge. And we're gonna fill this, and then, so the idea is, I'm gonna show you, place it like this on an angle, and then this will be brains, maybe, and some tentacles, but we're gonna make it glam. That's the main point. We're gonna make it very, very glam and pretty, not just like Halloween ugly or scary. There will be blood. Okay, let's start. Let's cover it. Let's fill it with our cake pops mixture. You can make it from chocolate and make it hollow, but this form is not very sturdy, so I don't think that making it from chocolate will be a good idea because it can break. And what we are going to do on the masterclass, right? And this way we kind of have a cake. It's more sturdy, and if something will happen, we will fix it because the ganache and the cake, easy. If you're making it at home, you can bake the cake in this mold, then slice it, fill it, and then cover the form with chocolate, and then place your cake. So you will have all the nice indentations, and the form will be nice. It will be the same, because I saw these cakes baked from this mold. It's horrible. It's so bad. It's like, ugh. Because the dough cannot fill in all the indentations. So I didn't fill it to the top. It's so heavy. What do I do? Maybe I place it more on the like standing from. Okay, like this. Yeah. Okay, that's why we do test cakes. This is the front. I know my cake is not straight at all. Maybe like this. Okay. Not a big deal if we will ruin our cake, right? No. Oh my god. The ganache is so ooh, that's a pretty cut. Pretty cut from a zombie cake. I was thinking initially to place it like this to have some height. Let's see. It took me too long to explain in the video, so I wanted the skull to be blending into the cake. It will be like laying on the cake, but we will blend the sides and the top, and that's why I need to cut more to adjust the position. Because right now the skull is just laying on the front. Okay, I'm going to cover it in ganache. For dummy or zombie cakes, I use different ganache. I don't use my Belgian fancy chocolate. I'm using almond bark from Walmart because it's way less expensive and it still works. The only thing is that you still need to use good butter, because otherwise the texture of ganache, it will be so hard to work with. So while we are waiting, when our cake is, the other part is in the freezer, I'm going to do a makeover for my last year one and fix it. It's been a rough year for this cake. It was in the sun, And my microphone stopped working. Luckily, nothing important is happening here. I'm just peeling off all the decorations, and then I'm going to cover the cake in ganache. If you want to clean your dummy cake fast, you need to plan ahead. Just place it in a dishwasher on a full cycle, and that's it. The only issue is that you need to make it like a day ahead because you need your dummy cake to dry. I didn't want to wait, so I'm just going to remove the larger pieces and then cover in ganache. It's quite a struggle for me to work with the dummy cakes, so let's just skip that part. I was able to cover the cake in ganache and placed it in the fridge. Okay, I'm back with my mold. It was in the freezer for like an hour. And again, my microphone stopped working. I don't know what's happening, and I would really appreciate any help with this. Okay, so I brought the cake from the freezer. It's quite solid, and I'm just gently unmolding it. It worked nicely, and everything was great except some bubbles that I'm going to just rub with my fingers to smooth. And the teeth, I'm going to use a carving tool to define them a little more. So the skull is quite heavy, and I decided to cut even more cake to adjust the position so it's more secure. And then the fun part, I'm using ganache to smooth the edges and kind of make the skull to emerge from the cake, to blend it with the cake. So first I added ganache with the spatula to fill all the holes, and then I'm using all types of blending tools to smooth it, even my fingers, because the heat of your hands helps to melt the ganache and to smooth it. And all this sculpting technique, that's why I used ganache instead of chocolate, because it's the same medium, ganache on the cake and ganache on the skull, and it's easier to blend them. And then I fixed the bump on his head by simply adding more ganache and smoothing it. The bump occurred because the mold is silicone and it's soft. This is the heat gun that I'm using to melt the chocolate on top, but we don't want to melt it too much because we will lose all the details. So I've made some black chocolate ganache. We're going to spray with our spray gun. Okay, it's starting to melt in the fridge. For better coverage, it's better to do it in stages. Usually I do 2 coats, and while my first cake is in the fridge, I'm covering the skull. And then 2 more layers. Then I melted some white and black cocoa butter, and I'm using a brush to deepen the shadows in the eyes. And then with a sponge I paint the skull, because it's white. I like this painting technique when you have black color underneath, and then you just add lighter color or white on a surface, and that's where you have shadows, just by itself. The skull goes in the fridge, and I'm making isomalt bubbles. I'm going to cover this topic in a separate video, because there are a lot of details and safety concerns if you want to try it at home, but basically you need to temper your isomalt, or you can buy pre-tempered one. You melt it, and then using the sphere form we make the bubbles, same as with chocolate. And the good question is why I decided to make the bubbles. It's because initially I wanted to make the witch cauldron cake with green poison, and for poison I wanted to use mirror glaze in these isomalt bubbles because I think it will be more visually interesting because of the light. It will go through, it will reflect, it will shine. As you know, I love to use different textures in my cakes. I've made quite a lot of these half spheres, different shades, like very green and little darker one. And then you just connect them, same as with chocolate spheres, but even easier because isomalt is very sticky. So I just dip in the half spheres in the melted isomalt and connecting them together. So pretty. So for the next cake, I've made marshmallow skulls using the ice mold and resin mold. And now I'm going to paint them to add more depth. I'm using Everclear and airbrush color and just painting it with a brush. There are a few reasons why I used marshmallow instead of chocolate for the skulls. or better say gummies, because they have agar-agar instead of gelatin, whatever. So first of all, it's way cheaper than chocolate. Second, I love that they're so squishy and you can easily arrange a composition by like squishing them on top of the cake. For chocolate, you need to find a place for each skull and then glue them together with chocolate. And for these ones, they are sticky, you just need water. Another reason is how the paint works. My skulls are dried a little, so the paint absorption is different on different areas. Like this large skull, he has some cracks because the outer layer of the gummy dried more, and so it's really cool, I think. And that's it, look how cool and squishy they are. Oh, and by the way, I made the brain cake that will also be covered in a separate video. So cool! But the other cakes are finally ready and we can start decorating them. As usual, I'm adding the larger pieces first and then adding smaller ones. But I realized that I want a bigger pile. So I removed the large skull and added some black molecular moss or sponge moss that I'm using here as a filler. Then I added small skulls around and then placed the large skull on top of the moss. Then added more skulls, and that's it. The cake looks quite plain at this point, but let's leave it for now and finish our carved mold skull. I'm just arranging my bubbles on the top of the cake, starting from the large ones, and I'm trying to find the best spot for each one, and then I'm using black moss to fill in the gaps and also to secure them even more together. But one dropped anyway, and that's why we make extra. I left the broken one on the board and then added more to the left side. Now, let's create tentacles, because who can stop me? I've rolled one and tried the size to see if it's working. Looks good so far. So I've made 5 of them, different lengths and sizes, and textured them with my favorite sponge. And then was the longest, making these tiny suction cups. I tried to speed up the process, but it still took forever. So now we have 2 cakes that doesn't look wow. I made fondant chains and pearls, and now I'm adding these edible sprinkles, which are not really edible because they're huge and they're so hard you can break your tooth. But it's a dummy cake, and in my opinion, those sprinkles are only for dummy cakes. And you also can see that I added the black pearls to the skull cake, and now they look cohesive together. But that is not the end of the story, because the cake is dummy, it's very lightweight, and when I was putting it in the fridge, I knocked it over and ruined the front part. But I made it even better because I added the cabochon with the skulls in front, and I think it's made it even more vintage and more cool. So this is the 3 cakes that I've made, and for the masterclass I will make one that will combine all of them together somehow. So let's see.